So I thought I'd do you a quick update on my coil slugs and how they're working out. Just started aligning, just doing the broadcast band. There's the oscillator coil, and I've got one of my homemade slugs in it. Over here is the output of that stage, and you can see I took one of the boogered up slugs, took a coping saw, cut me a fine slot in it using that one there, and they're working great. So I can this one's a little tight, so I have to use a nut driver on it, but so you can see it's tuning the oscillator just fine. Output stage works just as well. And the 1500 KCN, which you tune with these little trimmers here, it's working well. So the broadcast band is working well. I can actually hook an antenna to it, take my signal generator off, hook an antenna to it, and let's see what we got here. Hooked up the wrong thing. Let me get an antenna on there.
Career start, never pitched more than 7 innings, throws the no-hitter. A couple of phone calls here coming up. I got some thoughts on Mike D'Antoni leaving the Rockets. I told you that was...
So everything's working. These little homemade slugs look like they're going to do the job. So now I got to get into the higher frequency bands and see how that works out. I ran into a problem on the band 6, the highest band on this radio, that I couldn't get, well, it had an intermittent problem when I tried to align that band. I could push, this is, back up here a little bit, this is this first compartment here. This is band 1, band 2, then it hops up here to the top and comes back down. This is band 6, the string across here. And I could press on this little terminal right here, and it would, the signal would go in and out. So I'm going to take this trimmer out and see, it looks like maybe a connection's broken underneath or a bad connection. I'm going to have to take it out and see what the problem is, because I resoldered it and that didn't cure the problem. So let me give it a try here. Now, a few things I've learned about this SX-28. The alignment, well, it's an easy alignment, except it didn't work real well on mine. I had a lot of trouble getting it to track. You could set one end of the band, go back to the other end, set the coils, go back to the other end, set the caps, and it would be off. You just couldn't get it to track on the ends correctly. One thing I figured out, this chart that's in the book as to how to set this, just take for instance band, well, it's any band, I can't read this, there's band 4. They recommend you set the high end at 10 megacycles and a low end at 7. But on the dial, that band covers from 5.8 to 11, and I found that if I aligned it to the very ends of the band, not what they recommend, but actually 5.8 to, I actually went to 11.5, which is on the dial. when I set the ends of the band that way, it tracked really close. I mean, good enough. And so that fixed that. On band 6, I think it was. Yeah, that band 6 covers from 21 to 42. I could set the 42 megacycle end, go back down to the 21 megacycle end, and what would happen was the thing would just stop oscillating or stop working totally around 25 megahertz. I couldn't get it to do anything. It would just die. Once you passed about 25 megahertz, the radio just died. So after a day or two of working on that, trying to figure out what in the crap was going on here, I finally decided to change the mixer tube, the 6SA7, and that fixed it. That tube just would not go down below 25 megacycles. Now what's strange about that, it worked just fine on the lower bands, lower than 25 megahertz. So I don't understand that, but changing the tube fixed that problem. And radio's working great now.
Night with a low around 48. And look for the sunshine to continue on Thursday as well.
And it's working on all bands. It's about midday here, so it's not going to pick up much on the shortwave bands. I'll wait till tonight and maybe do another little video with the high-end bands. According to the schematic, this ought to be a 27K 2-watt resistor. I measured it, and it's around, this bundle of resistors in parallel is around 3K, so I think somebody may have read the schematic, translated 27K to 2700, or because it's only about 3K, so I need to take that out and replace it with a 27K 2-watt. Whoever said this was a difficult restoration made the understatement of the ages. I think I've finished recapping it. I've still got a few resistors. There's some 2-watt resistors that I didn't have the right value. I had to order them, so I'm waiting for those to come in. But there's the pile of wax caps. There's 39 of them there that I've replaced, and I believe there's 26 resistors here. There's 2 resistors still in the radio that I'm waiting on replacements to come in. If you take the 39 wax and add the 5 electrolytics, which I haven't replaced yet, that's 44 capacitors. According to what I read, maybe it's supposed to be a few more than that if you count the electrolytics, and so they must be hidden somewhere, because I think I've gotten every one of them. But these things are monsters to get to, and this radio was particularly bad because the resistors, a lot of them you can't read the color code, it's deteriorated, and a lot of the capacitors I really had to, so you spend a lot of time studying the schematic, trying to figure out where they go in the schematic, because a lot of them are soldered to tie points which go to a wire which goes somewhere, so you got to figure out where that goes to determine the right value in the first place. And I saw somewhere it said it'd take about 5 hours to replace all the caps. Well, it took me 5 days. A few things I've done. First of all, I've cleaned the chassis up best I can. As I have stated before, this thing was sitting on a basement floor for about 30 years. I don't know what the atmosphere was, but I think a lot of it was just nicotine. It was just yellow inside, and it can't be made, this one can't be made to look but so pretty. Let me get some more light over here. I used lacquer thinner and a brush and a lot of paper towels, and that seemed to do the best job, or the good job as I could do. A few little small things I had to do. The RF gain control was bad, very intermittent. I cleaned it, but didn't help, so I replaced that. The transmit receive switch was bad. In fact, when I first hooked this radio up, I couldn't get it to operate at all, and I finally figured out that the receive switch was bad, and put it in receive, nothing happens. So I replaced that, and it's definitely bad. There's the bad one I took out. And I've tested all the tubes. I think it was about 3 that were very, very weak, including the 6H6, which kind of surprised me. But I replaced all the weak ones, and I had one was actually shorted. I don't think this radio worked in a long time. Not well, anyway. And I guess it's the reason it ended up on a basement floor. The good news is all of the dial cord is intact. All of these are operating. Let me see if I can find something here to turn this shaft and show you that all of the little needles, get some light here, are going up and down as they should. So that's the good news. Just hope that dial cord will last a while. And I'm waiting on some 2-watt resistors. I didn't have the values I needed. Also, on the back, you've got 2 of those speaker outputs. One's 500 ohm, one's 5000 ohm. They were intact, and the little plastic base was intact, but the antenna, the plastic bezel for that was completely missing. And so I found one of those on eBay, and it's on the way. I've got next, you can see one of the bolts was missing out of this gear assembly, just missing completely. So that's my next thing here. I'm going to replace that. I don't think all of that play should be in it. And there is one screw nut combination missing. So I'll fix that, and then I'll have to start on this cabinet. It's all laying here on the floor, and I'm probably going to sandblast this, take those little chrome strips off. They're covered with blue paint. Somebody painted the whole cabinet solid metallic blue, and they didn't take those off or tape them up, and actually a lot of it got inside. It sprayed inside the radio. I had used lacquer thinner to clean up a lot of that. As I have said, this is definitely a junk radio. Only a sane person would have tried to restore it. It probably would have made a much better parts radio. And oh yeah, I restuffed the capacity electrolytics, and I put wires on mine because the wires that went to these things inside the radio were fairly short. I didn't want to have to deal with trying to stretch them, and so I put some wires on these, and I'll connect it to the wires in the radio, and got them all color coded differently so I'll know which value is which. So they're all ready. Got another coil slug setting up over here, and I'm going to make 2 or 3 more and hope that we can get this radio to tune up at some point. I ran into a little problem here, and I don't mind telling you, not ashamed to tell you, it took me 3 days of working on this, trying to find out what was wrong. This is the audio section. I've tried to get the audio section working first. No use, if that ain't gonna work, then you're not gonna get anything else done. So I started on that, and it didn't work, and did my regular checks. And this circuit uses a 6SC7 driver into 2 6V6s. The voltage, the plate voltage for this driver over here, you got 2 plates pushing those push-pull 6V6s. The B plus voltage on these plates is derived from this R38 right here. It's a 47K resistor, which goes over and connects to 280 volts. So I'm concentrating on this audio portion, figuring there's got to be something wrong in here, because when I I had like 20 volts on the plate of this 6SC7. So when I disconnect this R38, well, and I measured the tip of it, it's 280 volts. Would be, because there's no current flowing through it. Immediately when I reconnect this R38 to this point right here, center point, where those 2 100Ks and 10 microfarad are hooked up, the voltage would drop to 24 volts. So obviously there's a big short somewhere. That's my thinking. I spent 3 days trying to figure out what was shorted in this audio circuit. I checked every bypass and every coupling capacitor, looking for a shorted one or a leaky one. Nothing. I mean, everything measured perfectly. So I went to the military manual on this SX-28, and if you're working on these and you don't have a military manual, you need to. They're on the web. You can download them free, because it has a nice resistance chart. You can measure resistance to ground on every pin on every tube, looking for some clues. I hadn't done that yet, so I measured the resistance measurements on every pin of every tube, and I got some erroneous readings in several places. Well, that manual is nice also, because it'll tell you if you get an erroneous reading at a certain pin, it'll tell you which resistors to check for open, and if it's a short, which capacitors to check. And what became obvious was every erroneous reading I had, you check R31 and R32. Well, that's not in this circuit. Let me go over here to the other diagram, and a little blurry, but that point there where that 47K that feeds the audio circuit is connected directly to 280 volts, it goes up to a voltage divider, and it's a wire wound voltage divider. In fact, it's one of those strange looking deals where it's a wire wound resistor in a metal case, and one end of it's ground, then you got 2 taps, and one of those is 100 volts and the other one's 280 for this radio. So when I initially started checking everything, and I checked every resistor including this, and the resistances on these pins measured correctly. So, you know, I'm thinking it can't be that. So I checked them again, and they seemed to be correct. So then I fired it up, and the voltages seemed to be correct. 280 there on the top, 100 volts at the center, and ground. Nevertheless, when I hook up this 47K, the voltage drops, feeding this audio circuit. So after another day of fooling with it, I finally said, I'm going to replace those resistors. And I did. I found some appropriate resistors, and I replaced that wire wound resistor, and it cured the problem. Now, I still don't know why. I figured there was some kind of leakage in that wire wound resistor. It is wire wound resistor in a metal case, and the case is grounded, and it's got some insulating paper that divides it. But I think there was some leakage there that evidently, when you applied a load, remember I only had the audio tubes in, I didn't have all the other tubes in the radio. So when you actually fired up those audio tubes and therefore applied a load to this voltage dividing resistor, there was enough leakage in there somewhere that it killed the voltage. As I said, you could measure the voltage on the resistor and they were correct. You could measure the resistance of the two sections and they were correct, but I had to replace them before the audio section would work. Now it works, so whatever. Just thought I'd throw that in.